welcome back to Hook Connections. It's been great to have a couple months off, and now we're ready to go to educate the consumer some more. We'd like to thank Welford Theater for allowing this to occur, and Logan Street Signs and Banners for being our sponsor. We have a great guest today. Our guest today is Yason Yost from Indoor Environmental Consulting, and many of you have heard in the past where I've talked about living in an apartment with mold, and it was due to improper maintenance. So, there's no better expert to have on our show than an air quality expert. So, Yason, welcome. Thanks for coming to Noblesville today.
Thanks for having me.
The first thing I would like for you to do is just kind of tell everybody this first segment why you do what you do and how you started and what steps you've gone to get to this point.
Well, I started like a lot of people did. I came out of high school, got a job working at a structural drawing company. As I went to college and advanced in that career, I got introduced to an industrial hygienist. I thought it was absolutely fascinating. And so I changed the degree, became an occupational safety and health professional. And I paid attention, I guess. Over the years, I started saying, what's lacking? What do we need to improve? And I've always felt like if something bothers you, you ought to try to do something about it.
Right.
Not just complain about it, but try to do something about it. And I always felt like there were abilities that God gave me that I just wasn't freed up to serve people with. And so I set out to establish solutions so that I could invest in people's needs more.
So, and what steps have you taken to get to the point of indoor environmental consulting? What different sections of the industry have you worked in to really qualify you to start this consulting business?
Well, like I said, started out in structural drawing.
Explain to people what structural drying is.
Well, you have a leak or water damage, and a structural dryer is someone who would come out and process that damage, dry it out successfully so that there's no secondary damages. And then I moved on from there into doing the restoration work associated with that, to product testing.
And the restoration work is building back?
Just
right.
All of it, yeah, start to finish. And fire damage restoration, crime scene cleanups, and eventually industrial hygiene, and then occupational safety and health. And I had gone from being the technician to actually designing engineering controls in a warehouse for a large establishment, being the consultant, an occupational safety and health consultant for a large restoration company, and then eventually contract industrial hygiene work. And so it's a process. I've been doing this 24 years.
Well, and our conversation on the phone this week, it was so genuine, and you just don't find a lot of people that are this genuine. He didn't feel in these prior positions that he was really able to assist and help the consumer. Right. And the consumer has no idea until you go through it exactly what mold, for instance, in your home, what it can do to you. I mean, I know now.
Right.
After 11 months. So, there's a lot of different ways that people can look at things. A lot of times people become ill, and they have no idea that it's because of the air quality in their home that is causing the illness, or mold spores that are running around all over in their house. And so I just like I like the way he is out there. And if you go to his website, which, what is your website real quick?
It's www.solutionsIEC.com.
IEC.com. And you will see blog posts where people have asked him questions, and his response is to educate them. Okay. And when he does do a service for him, which we'll go into the next segment, what the difference in the services are, he educates them, and it doesn't cost him anything to have that education, which is really important because doctors nowadays know very little about mold exposure and the symptoms that can occur from that mold exposure.
Well, we'll talk about that for a minute. First, the blog website is ibosocial.com www.facebook.com/solutions IEC. And if you click on PRS, there's all the blogs, and there's also a videos tab where you can look at a few videos. That's all free information. But to your point about doctors, I guess it's been about 8-10 years now in these medical meetings, conferences every year that they have. There's several associations and institutes where medical professionals are saying, we recognize that there's a need to help patients understand whether or not the indoor environmental quality is impacting their health. It's even helpful in treatment. However, they have several issues that they admit every year almost repeatedly. Number one is they don't know enough themselves about building science.
Right.
Number two is there are a lot of assessors out there that are not doing an appropriate job. So it doesn't help to have it done if they're doing an inappropriate job.
Right.
So those are two of the biggest reasons that come up every year
Right.
in these meetings. And I think it goes back to what led me into this is you have to have someone willing to invest in people and their needs. And if they're willing to invest in people and their needs, they're not just coming out to your home or business, taking tests, giving you a lab report or some other report. They're
And
actually
sending you an invoice with nothing else to go with it.
Exactly. They're actually spending time discussing the report, answering your questions, and in some cases even talking to your subcontractors, your contractors, helping them understand it. Because ultimately these folks are coming in trying to fulfill the protocol in these reports. They need to understand the report. They need to understand what the expectations are.
Absolutely.
And so if someone's willing to invest in these people, they have a better opportunity to serve effectively people in the community. I've always said I think it's a crime that a consumer has to take time to learn an industry to manage the people they're hiring. It's the professional's job to understand their industry and go out and serve the customer.
Right.
So in today's world, I think with all the stuff on the internet and in the media and other places out there, some opportunistic contractors even, that people have someone advocating for them, helping them get through whatever situation they're facing.
Absolutely. You know, and he even described a couple of situations to me, and couldn't go into a lot of detail, but of a case he's working on right now with an attorney, and there's actually investigation that the parent of one of the people that owned this home has died, and now they're investigating whether some of the air quality in the home has caused that. So it's absolutely frightening. Just a little bit about my background and how I know a little bit about it is I moved into an apartment complex in May 23rd of 14, and on June 17th I was already in my doctor's office with respiratory illnesses. So it doesn't take long to affect you. You might live in it a year before it really affects you. So we need to take a short break. Jason, could you give everyone your phone number for those that will be listening on the radio show?
Okay. It's 877-624-7185.
And we will be right back the next segment to talk about the differences between assessments, inspections, who's qualified, who's not. So we'll be back in a little bit.
You know, when Margaret and I decided to sell the old estate here, we had only one choice in signage. Logan Street signs and banners. Conveniently not located on Logan Street anymore, but rather located on 10th Street on the south side of Noblesville. Well, we sold the old beauty, and we were able to buy this wonderful estate. And we had so much money left over, I was able to buy this beautiful 1968 Eldorado Cadillac for Margaret. Only 472,000 miles. Margaret loves it because it's got those big seats and that heavy-duty suspension to support her svelte frame. Next time you're looking for signs or banners, call old Jim at Logan Street Signs and Banners, 773-7200. Conveniently not located on Logan Street anymore.
Everyone knows it's easy to find first-run movies in the big theaters. But where can you go to watch your favorite classic movies on the big screen for the perfect night out? Why rent a flick when you can rent the entire theater? Call today to reserve our 32-seat theater for your next event, or just stop by to see what's showing this weekend. 14 by 7 foot screen and the high quality digital surround sound system offers all the amenities you would expect from the big theaters, with a laid back atmosphere and comfortable seating of your own home. Wofford Theater at 1744 South 10th Street in Noblesville gives you the classic movies you want with a big theater experience.
Welcome back to the second segment with Yason Yost about your indoor air quality. And he and I had a very lengthy discussion this week on the telephone about who is really qualified to come in and look at your house, inspect it, assess it for any kind of air quality problems. So, Yason, could you kind of, and I saw and I understood what he was talking about from the very beginning, but there are restoration companies out there that will go out and inspect people's houses for mold. And then they do the air sampling.
Right.
And that is very contradictory and a conflict of interest. They should not be doing both. Could you explain to the people exactly what the differences are between a restoration company doing an air sampling and you going in and doing an assessment or an inspection?
Well, the easiest way to look at it is this. If a remediator comes in and does an assessment of your home or your business and tells you, well, here's your problems. This is what you need to do about it. The quickest and most reasonable question to ask yourself is, do they have something to gain by telling you that you have a problem? If they test their own work afterwards, do they have something to gain by telling you that the work is completed effectively? Of course they do. They get paid.
Right.
So if nothing else, you want to avoid that conflict of interest. That's not to say that there aren't certain people out there in the remediation industry qualified to do assessments. I myself, when I finished my career in restoration, was an indoor environmentalist. I was qualified to do it, but I didn't. So there's a potential to corrupt the motivation, and legally speaking, that is a conflict of interest.
Well, and you have to be able to sleep on your pillow at night,
Right. And the other aspect of this is, and you see it in the inspection industry from various types of inspectors, is you get a person that might be qualified to handle one or two types of environmental stressors. Maybe it's mold and asbestos, or asbestos and lead. And they get called in to do an assessment, and because they aren't competent in other aspects of environmental assessment, they miss something. So you want your assessor to be able to say, for example, I can evaluate moisture control. I can evaluate structural drying. I can evaluate the operation and effectiveness of ventilation systems or weatherization systems. So when they go in to do the mold inspection, not only are they taking an air sample and telling you, well, here's some lab results. They're saying, we identified the causal factors, we've identified the extent of damage, we've identified potential risk and hazard, and based on these things, and some other factors perhaps, here's a corrective action plan. And you want that plan developed by somebody, like I said, has no financial gain in the sale of products or remediation or restoration.
Absolutely.
So if you get that, then you can trust the inspection more. And I think even in the end, you trust the verification inspection at the end of remediation because it's non-biased.
Well, and could you go through and just tell our listeners and watchers, viewers, tell them exactly what you can do when there is a mold claim or water damage claim to help protect that consumer and to make sure everything is on the right track?
Well, the biggest thing you can do is before you have a claim, before you have a damage, is proactively seek out team members. Go out and find out who's doing structural drying, who's doing water damage restoration, who's doing fire damage restoration, who's doing microbial remediation, who's doing industrial hygiene assessments. And get to know these professionals, ask questions, and develop an emergency response plan. Once you've developed a plan and you have a team that you trust, you're able then to buy the appropriate insurance for those claims. A lot of people will find when they file a claim, Well, my insurance don't cover that. Or I don't know how to communicate it effectively to get coverage. Or I didn't know I needed that coverage.
Well, and you know, that's another time when Hook Connect comes into play, because Hook Connect teams up with all of those professionals. You don't want to have to get to the point where you've had the mold claim or the water damage claim, and then mold develops within that 48-hour period, which happens all the time, and then have to use an attorney, because then the expense just gets, it's just not pretty. So having, you know, a company like Jason's come in and do an assessment for you, even prior to any claims, you know, meet with these people. Even it's going to take a little bit of your time to build a relationship with all of these team members. But if you have an insurance agent that's not consulting with you on a regular basis, that doesn't pick up the phone and call you, that doesn't explain your policy in detail, what's covered and what's not covered, or if you buy homeowners insurance over the internet, shame on you. So it's just a matter of having all of those right people in place.
And you have to understand, too, there's difference between an insurance agent and an insurance adjuster. And an agent's ability to understand needs on a claim and make decisions is limited in comparison to an adjuster, and an adjuster limited to that an industrial hygienist or a microbial remediator or whomever else you're talking about might provide.
Correct.
So that's why you need the team of people willing to work together,
Absolutely.
communicate with one another. If you get that, you're going to go under a lot less stress when you go through these claims, and potentially a lot less, there'll be a lot less risk.
So, and if a homeowner suspects that something's not right in their house, they've bought a house, everybody's, excuse me, everybody's been sick since they moved into the house. There's just something not right about it, or even before buying the house. Can they call you to come out and do an assessment of that property, of that home, of that air quality, before or after they're in that home, to make sure that everything is safe for their families?
Yes, ma'am. And what we do is we interview people on the phone, get some history, develop the appropriate inspection protocol, and communicate that, help them understand it first, and then we proceed with the inspection.
Absolutely. And Jason, if you would again, please give everybody your email address and a contact phone number, because this will be aired on the radio, Hamilton County Radio, for a week. Is it a week, Jim? At 8:00 p.m., I believe. So be sure and give us, again, your email address and your phone number.
Okay. You can contact me directly at jasony@solutionsIEC.com, and the phone number is 877-624-7185.
All right, and it's time for a break. We want to thank Wofford Theater again for allowing this production to happen, and Logan Street Signs and Banners for being our sponsor. We will be back in the next segment then.
You know, when Margaret and I decided to sell the old estate here, we had only one choice in signage: Logan Street Signs and Banners. Conveniently not located on Logan Street anymore, but rather located on 10th Street on the south side of Noblesville. Well, we sold the old beauty, and we were able to buy this wonderful estate. And we had so much money left over, I was able to buy this beautiful 1968 Eldorado Cadillac for Margaret. Only 472,000 miles. Margaret loves it because it's got those big seats and that heavy-duty suspension to support her svelte frame. Next time you're looking for signs or banners, call old Jim at Logan Street Signs and Banners, 773-7200. Conveniently not located on Logan Street anymore.
Everyone knows it's easy to find first-run movies in the big theaters. But where can you go to watch your favorite classic movies on the big screen for the perfect night out? Why rent a flick when you can rent the entire theater? Call today to reserve our 32-seat theater for your next event, or just stop by to see what's showing this weekend. 14 by 7 foot screen and the high quality digital surround sound system offers all the amenities you would expect from the big theaters with a laid back atmosphere and comfortable seating of your own home. Wofford Theater at 1744 South 10th Street in Noblesville gives you the classic movies you want with a big theater experience.
Welcome back to the last segment today of Hook Connections. I am Barbara Hook with Hook Connect. We are your service provider resource. So we go out and investigate those companies that can do those services for you. They can do mold inspections, they can do remediation, they can do board ups after a fire, they can do roofing repair, any kind of service provider that there is out there. So we promote the honest guy, so we kind of call ourselves the honest list. Welcome back, Jason. It is, I put something out there on social media this week and asked people what some of their questions were in reference to mold. What would 2 questions be that they would ask? And one of the questions was, are any types of mold considered harmless?
Yeah, and really, I have to give you an indirect answer to that. With mold, there's something called the biodiversity principle in environmental science. And what scientists are saying is, even though we've only identified 180,000 species, we think there's over 1 million. And if you think of it in terms like this, there may be somebody that you get along with really well and your husband can't stand that person. Well, it kind of works that way with us and these organisms, and different types of organisms at different doses in different environments. And so what you're really asking is, are there certain environments where I might be exposed to mold and not have a response? And the answer to that for some people is yes, and for other people no, and it'll vary. So you can't measure the level of risk off of how much mold do I see. And there's a lot of contractors that do that. You can't measure it off past response to exposure. You can't measure it off of even air quality tests, because you may have an air quality test that someone tells you is negative, but you haven't had a negative response to it.
Or color of the mold, you can't base it on
Color,
that.
definitely not. Yeah, certainly not.
Okay, so second question, if I have mold in my house, should I have the furniture cleaned and or treated?
It depends on the level of contamination. If the air quality in that room is contaminated, if the dust has been found to harbor abnormal levels or growth of mold, then certainly you run an issue with that.
Is cleaning the soft porous material sufficient, or should you discard of those items?
It depends on the level of contamination. If there's
Okay.
growth there, then you don't want to keep it.
Okay.
But if it's just settled spores or hyphal fragments, in many cases you can clean it.
Okay, that's great. Okay, next question. Is there a home test you can do to see if you have mold in your basement?
Yeah, no, nothing effective, unfortunately. I use this analogy. If you put food out on your front porch and you ask yourself, will an animal show up to eat it? Eventually an animal will. The question is, how long is it going to take and what kind of animal is it going to be?
Absolutely.
So these are ineffective, and by themselves, how are you going to interpret that data? And even if you do interpret that data correctly, how do you know what caused the problem if it tells you there is a problem? So there's a lot of questions unanswered. Sampling should be used as just one tool in the process of inspecting your building.
Moisture content should be used too. I mean, that's real
Psychrometrics.
important. Yeah.
Yeah, is the weatherization correct? Ventilation correct? What is that doing to surface temperatures,
Absolutely.
moisture, humidity against the surface, moisture in the material? What's causing it to be there? Just a number of things.
Absolutely.
By themselves, I don't know that I'd waste my money on that.
Yeah. And I already know the next one, but I'm going to let you answer this
Okay.
in the professional manner. Will bleach kill mold?
Can it kill mold? The answer is yes, but is it the appropriate product to use? Most of the time, it's unnecessary. Bleach has the ability to be a life-killing agent. That's why we call it a biocide. It can even kill us. But that doesn't mean you should go and use it. Biocides of any type have a limited effectiveness, and there are a lot of things that will neutralize them. You could take a life-killing agent in its strongest concentrations and find that under certain loads of organic debris, certain pH conditions, moisture conditions, even sometimes oxygen levels can neutralize the biocide. And there's EPA registered, for example, there's EPA registered antimicrobial paints that when applied to a damp microclimate or a damp surface, the mold can actually say, well, the moisture's neutralized the antimicrobial properties, we're going to break down components of the paint and eat it.
Wow.
And so it's just not a reliable methodology. That's why you won't find anybody credible telling you to encapsulate mold.
Well, and you hear there's some old companies around town even that have their miracle products that they spray, and they don't have to get rid of the drywall, get rid of the carpet, which is just such a farce. I mean, it's just so dishonest. And this same company actually goes out and they do the inspections and they do the testing, and they don't use an accredited, laboratory. So,
well, and if you look at the lawsuits that came out of Louisiana after Katrina, there were people coming in there using very harsh products, claiming just that. We can fog, we can kill, and it's all okay. And one thing led to another. State of Louisiana ended up suing multiple people and won this case because there was still all the mold in the buildings.
absolutely.
And what some people don't tell you when we're putting these products in is even if, best case scenario, even if they're effective, they're only killing the organism, they're not removing it. And dead organisms can still be an allergy or asthma trigger. So it's not by itself a process of remediation.
Right. And it's really tough because we could have him on the show for a couple hours actually. So we're going to have him back on at a future date to talk about what the consumer should know what the difference is between the inspector and the certifications. Just because someone has a certification that they took a test doesn't mean that they're qualified to do the work of remediating and getting rid of that mold. So I did want to talk about a couple of things before we close. First of all, Jason, go ahead and give us your phone number again and the best way to contact you.
Okay. You can call me at 877-624-7185, and my email address is jasony@solutionsIEC.com.
Great. Hamilton County Harvest Food Bank is actually having a food drive here a week from this Saturday, August the 15th, from 9 o'clock to 1 p.m. Location is 1720 South 10th Street in Noblesville. The food items are needed desperately for the Hamilton County Harvest Food Bank. So make sure you check it out at hchfoodbank.org, or just show up and bring your donations, and it's a free cookout, drinks, and popcorn. So also our guest next week, I'm actually part of Sertoma Club of Greenwood, and next Saturday is Wham Fest, which is Wine, Art, Music, and Microbrew Festival, showcasing local artists, wineries, breweries, food vendors. And we have 6 great bands that are going to be performing. So next week's guest, we hope to have someone that's going to be a vendor at Wham Fest. So we will see you next week.